Welcome back, Rankers. Let's get right into it. Paul Benham has, from the UK, has left a message on the Facebook page, and this is the best way, if you want an SEO question answered, this is the best way for me to get to it, is to put it on here. Now, I know a lot of you will send emails or just message me on Facebook, but the best way I can work through it is if it's on the Facebook page. And you can see here, even if I can't get to it, one of our friendly staff hopefully will. So hemp.co.uk, the question is, Paul, you're doing well in google.uk but not so well in google.com. Well, this is the conundrum of a top-level domain or a country-level domain. The .uk will rank in UK, and Google will assign rankings based on your country code. So what a lot of businesses do is that they will have a country code for each country in which they operate, and you set it up in Webmaster Tools so that Google knows that even if you may only have one site, you want your Singaporean visitors to see the .sg site in the results, or your UK customers to see the .uk in the results. Now, since you only have one domain name and it's a .uk, what I would recommend, if you're not turning up in google.com, and I would think that it's highly competitive phrase that you're trying to rank for, is set up another domain name. Go and buy another domain name, a .com or a .biz or anything else that's top level, and you can set it up in Google Webmaster Tools so it actually points at the exact same site. But in Webmaster Tools, tell Google that for the new domain name, you want that domain name is targeted at US geo searches, if you like. So don't ditch the old domain name because you've had it since 1997, a lot of history, that's good. But get an additional domain name and set them up separately in Google Webmaster Tools. Hopefully that makes sense. And another question this week from Jason Holm, who said, what is your opinion of people who create Google Places listings with fake addresses in other states? Having a debate with a client's SEO. Well, Jason, it annoys me, quite frankly. It's spam. And if you are setting up addresses in all the other states and every city, every town around Australia and telling Google you have an address and you don't, you will get slapped. Things are changing in places, and Google's getting better at identifying spammy entries in places. And that's been one of the main problems that I've had with Google Maps and Google Places over the last couple of years, is that it does get abused quite easily. So all those tricks now of setting up fake addresses in Google Places, Google is going to be onto. So it's a very short-term strategy. Sure, it might work for a little while, but ask yourself, how helpful is it to do a search and then in Google Places have 10 results that all point to the same company when you know that there are other companies out there who may offer the same product or service? That's the sort of thing Google's trying to eliminate. And with the merge of organic with Places, with that information together, it's going to be even harder for organisations to scam Google that way. So, Jason, I would say, yeah, give them the best advice that you can, but certainly not one that I'd be touching. And have you heard about WikiLeaks? Big news. I thought we'd take a look this week because what's happened... Actually, before we get on to WikiLeaks, quick story on Vitali Borka. You may have heard this week about a sunglasses e-tailer that claimed that he had great SEO because he was abusing his customers, and his customers would write stories about him and link back and say basically what a mongrel he was. And all of that activity created more backlinks, and the theory was that that was what was giving him his great rankings. Well, a story in Search Engine Land by Danny Sullivan has pointed out that that's not entirely true. But having said that, Google did react strongly to this because it was a big story in the New York Times saying, how can Google rank a site that gives such terrible customer service? Because Google's all about providing a good user experience and sending its users to sites that are great, basically. And that's one of the whole reasons why Google's so big on sites being updated on a regular basis. And you could argue that this may have sent signals to Google to say, well, there's all these links popping up around the web to this site, therefore that site's popular, therefore that site should be popular for that search. But according to Danny Sullivan of Search Engine Land, that wasn't the case. It was other links that were giving Vitaly Borka this particular ranking. However, Google did come out and say that they've changed their algorithm and they've stopped sites benefiting from customers complaining about them online. My take on it is that I don't think it's a big change in the algorithm. It couldn't be. They wouldn't roll it out that quick. I say it's a little bit like the old Google bomb. You may remember the Google bomb where thousands of bloggers logged the phrase miserable failure to George Bush's biography, and then his biography ranked for the word failure. That was called a Google bomb. What Google did in that instance was that they put a process across the top of the algorithm that they ran when they detected or when someone pointed out to them that a Google bomb was going on. I'd say this is a similar thing. It wouldn't be something that they would put into the algorithm as a permanent thing, but it would probably be a process that once something was pointed out to them that they would apply to the algorithm and see those rankings go away. So the moral of the story is be nice to your customers. I mean, really, I mean, I'm sure this guy has more than one website, but if you're trying to build longevity and brand, you probably want to be nice to your customers. And also, Jason, that goes for your client as well. I would point out to them that you know, if you start scamming Google like this, it is going to reflect badly on your brand. It's just going to look a bit dodgy in the search engine results pages. So, have you heard of WikiLeaks? Possibly. Just wanted to show you what can happen when your DNS goes awry. Some of you may have heard of WikiLeaks this week, and what's been happening is that a lot of governments around the world are trying to silence them fairly quickly. And so what happened was the company that was providing their DNS, and the DNS basically means that if you type in wikileaks.org, then the domain name system knows that if someone types that in, it goes to a certain IP address or a server somewhere. And you have a DNS provider to do that. In the case of WikiLeaks, it was every DNS. Every DNS withdrew the service because they said that WikiLeaks was getting distributed denial of service attacks and it was affecting all their other customers, so they withdrew the service. So that meant you couldn't go to wikileaks.org because no one was serving the DNS. You could actually go to their IP address if you just typed that in, but if you typed in the domain name, you couldn't. So what happened was that hundreds and thousands of people around that's hundreds or thousands, one of the two, I haven't done the numbers, but it's getting close to 1,000, have basically mirrored the DNS. So basically, you know, you can go to wikileaks.bandwidth.com.au and that will actually get you to the WikiLeaks site. Now what that means is that WikiLeaks is available at multiple addresses, and usually you would say, wow, that is a really bad duplicate content issue that you've got there, because you've got essentially hundreds of sites all pointing at the same content, or hundreds of addresses with the same content. So how has that hurt WikiLeaks in the rankings? Well, if we just go to, say, one of these cables down here, if we look for some Australian cables, make it topical, local, and here's one that they prepared earlier, where Kevin Rudd talks about China and a few other things. So we'll just grab that little bit of text there. And what I'm doing here is I'm checking for duplicate content. And I'm just putting it in my search box. I'm enclosing it in quotation marks, so I get an exact match for this phrase. Now, there is only one result for this page, and it's not WikiLeaks. It's a china.yuhan.net. Okay, that's interesting. So we know this copy is here on the page, but WikiLeaks isn't ranking for it. So then we take this bit down here. We search for that. now a lot more results for that, possibly because the cable has been republished, and the reason the other copy didn't turn up is maybe that header wasn't published on these sites. But you'll see here that that cable has been reproduced on a bunch of different sites. WikiLeaks is not number one though, even though that was the originator of the content. This is WikiLeaks down here, and you'll see here it's just purely an IP address. And that's because it lost its DNS. So when Google came spidering WikiLeaks, it would have got it from probably another link off the net that was pointing to that IP address. There was no domain name attached to it. So this is how duplicate content can affect you. So what should you be doing about, well, so WikiLeaks is still coming up as wikileaks.org. Just make sure that that's working this morning. But you'll see down here as well, we've got the IP address as well. So in an instance where you have multiple addresses all pointing at the same content, as is what's happening here, Google will have to try to work out who is the originator of the content. And because this purely has an IP address and no domain name, and wikileaks.org is not available. So that's why we go to wikileaks.bandwidth.com.au. So that basically means that if you have a lot of sites or a lot of URLs or a lot of addresses, you might have a .com, .com.au, .biz, .co.uk. If you all just point them at the same site, and you don't do that separation like I talked about for hemp.uk in Google Webmaster Tools and let Google know which site should be served for which country or which domain, then you're going to have issues like that with duplicate content. And if I was handling WikiLeaks Webmaster Tools, we'd be setting up all those hundreds of different domain names out there to point at specific countries, and that is how you avoid it. It's not, people say you get punished for duplicate content. You don't get punished, it's just that someone else's site who has the same content may rank higher than you for it. So it's not a punishment, it's just simply what Google finds first and what it thinks is most authoritative, and quite often that may not be your site if someone else has pinched your content or if it's available at another address. Hopefully that's helpful. See you next week. Thanks very much. Bye.